To me, a human rights defender it's an honorable thing to be called. One has to really prove that he or she defends rights of other people every day. It's not work. It's not something one can do 9 to 5, 9 to 6, and then go home and live in the office.
Maksym Butkevych, welcome to the Havel Channel and congratulations on winning this year's Václav Havel Human Rights Prize. Several of the previous winners were in jail when they got the award, so we're very glad that you're here in person. Of course, it's not so long since you spent 2 years in Russian prisons as a Ukrainian prisoner of war. Prior to joining the Ukrainian army, you had been a lifelong pacifist, you'd been an anarchist. What was the process of you deciding to put on hold your refugee assistance and humanitarian and human rights work and to join the army?
Thank you very much for your congratulations. And it's true that even this year I was shortlisted for Václav Havel Prize with 2 very brave colleagues who are currently in detention, fellow journalists. I hope they will be ready soon. When it comes to me joining the army, there was a number of reasons for that, but specifically to put on hold my human rights activities. I was called human rights defender, and to me, a human rights defender it's an honorable thing to be called. One has to really prove that he or she defends rights of other people every day. It's not work. It's not something one can do 9 to 5, 9 to 6, and then go home and live in the office. And I would say that over years and years of campaigning, advocacy, protest, education, we've achieved quite a lot in human rights realm in Ukraine. Of course, it's less than we wanted to, but so there are so many things to do. But still, comparing what has been there 20 years ago, for instance, and now, the difference is striking. And I understood pretty well that if Russia prevails when it launched its full-scale aggression against Ukraine, everything we've achieved would be just erased to the ground. And there would be no human rights defense and no human rights activity in Ukraine because Russian world and Russian system just doesn't have human rights as an important notion, as an important concept. The whole ideology of contemporary Russia is the opposite to the ideas of human dignity and human rights. And I realized that if I am called human rights defender, I need to defend human rights by means available to me. At that moment, these means were mounting resistance to Russian armed aggression, which means taking up arms and joining the forces of defense of Ukraine.
But how was the adjustment for you as a pacifist to take up arms? I mean, how did that feel internally? Did it go against your very nature?
I was never actually calling myself a pacifist in terms of someone who states that he or she would never use force. To me, it is too much of a theoretical concept, because if one is present at the scene of a huge crime being committed, where perpetrator can be stopped by using force only, and says, no, I'm not doing this because I'm a pacifist, then I believe this person, does he or she wants it or not, becomes an accomplice to the crime. If this is pacifism, then I'm not, and I was not. But if it is about someone who despises violence as a tool, it is true, I do, because violence dehumanizes us. So it was uncomfortable to acknowledge that we've got only extreme measures at our disposal in order to defend what is important, but it was fortunate that we had at least some tools to do that, and we had to resort to those tools available.
What were the circumstances of your capture by the Russians in June 2022?
We were stationed in Kiev, and then we were directed to the east of the country, where we had to reinforce our troops who were defending western part of Luhansk region, Luhansk Oblast. We found ourselves in the village called Mirna Dolina, which is Peaceful Valley in Ukrainian, and I should say that when I've heard that our battle assignment is in the village with such a title, I thought it's a bad omen to go to war to Peaceful Valley. Me and 8 of my subordinates were ordered to move to the observation point, and very soon our communications were jammed by Russians. Then we went out of water, and it was extremely hot summer of 2022, especially in that region. It is really hot. We realized that in the neighboring forest was entered by Russian troops next morning. And here suddenly a member of Ukrainian Armed Forces from neighboring battalion came onto radio waves saying that the whole area is encircled. It was true, but that there is still a way out, and if we follow his directions, we'll be able to get out. We didn't know that he was by that moment already captured by Russian forces, and that was a radio game which lured us into Russian positions to the place where we could not efficiently mount the resistance. And when we were informed about it, we already had guns pointed at us. A lot of thoughts crossed my mind in basically 1 or 2 seconds when I realized what's going on, but we could not mount the resistance under the circumstances. We did not perform already any battle order, and I was responsible for the life of 8 of my subordinates. So this is how we went into captivity.
Well, you were a prisoner of war, but if I understand it right, the Russians put you on trial for some kind of war crime. Why would they do that? Because usually, I imagine the public, usually one imagines a prisoner of war is placed in some camp, treated very harshly. We see images of these emaciated soldiers getting out after a couple of years. Why did they put you on trial?
It's a mystery to me. It is still a mystery to me, although there are several reasons, probably, which I could just guess about. Well, in the first place, I should say we didn't know what to expect when we went into captivity. I had this hope that Russians observe at least some provisions of international humanitarian law on treatment of POWs, that, for instance, will be put into a certain camp. As you know, any party to the Geneva Convention 3 on treatment of prisoners of war should set up special centers, special camps for prisoners of war. Ukraine has done so. Apparently, Russia has never done so. Currently, there are no specific camps. There are detention places, more than 200, as far as I know, detention places of Ukrainian POWs, and civilians in Russian detention are identified both in occupied territories of Ukraine and in Russia proper. But we were in detention anyway, so why bother fabricating criminal case against us and sentencing us and going through all the procedures? One reason I have seen was propaganda purposes. They talked so much on their TV shows. We didn't know that at the time, because at the time we didn't have access to Russian TV. I learned about this later. About Ukrainian war criminals, they had to show them at some point. So to use us for propaganda purposes. We were told as well that Ukraine puts on trial Russian war criminals, which is true. I mean, specifically those who committed war crimes, who get prison sentences, and that we are going to be sentenced in order to be exchanged for those sentenced by Ukraine. But this never materialized, apparently. And as it turned out later, it looks like Russia is not very much interested into getting its own soldiers from captivity. So I could understand the reasons, rationale behind the actions of perpetrators. Every solved, in quotation marks, criminal case against Ukrainian POW is an advancement on their career ladder. But otherwise, why Russian system needed it, and it was a systemic thing in motion, partly is still a mystery to me.
The Russians beat you and otherwise mistreated you. What does it do to somebody's mind to live in the constant, round-the-clock fear of violence, and not only violence, also death, because the violence could escalate at any moment that you can't predict? What does that do to your mind?
It was the most difficult thing to bear. Actually, I would say that fear was something I had most difficulties cope with, more than pain and more than hunger, because constant fear paralyzes. It deprives of agency, it deprives of will, it deprives of dignity. So the only thing which could help was to have inner realm untouched, still affected, but untouched fundamentally by this fear. And this inner realm could consist of many things. This could be certain rituals and repeated exercises, both physical and mental, attempts not to forget, for instance, foreign languages, or ability to express thoughts in words, composing texts, for those for believers praying or composing prayers. But to me it was also thinking about other people whom I love and who love me, about those who care about me, and I was sure every minute that I'm not forgotten, and that people out there in Ukraine and elsewhere, they think about me, they talk about me, and they fight for me. And this really kept going, because I was afraid that fear would force me at some point to do something I wouldn't be able to forgive myself for afterwards. But then when I thought about other people, about my loved ones, I realized I should not let them down. And this really helped me a lot.
You got out in a prisoner exchange a year ago this month, but now how close to the front of your mind are those experiences you're talking about a year later?
I think in this bit less than 1 year's time, I lived through events and situations which were so diverse, and there were so many of them. Maybe for someone that would be enough for half of a lifetime, actually. I went through different stages, as all those releases do. Original disorientation, and then extreme happiness, and then coming back to real life, like everyday life. But of course, there are things which are a result of my captivity. Some of them are not easy to live with. And of course, I still have night dreams about captivity, for instance, or triggers or flashbacks. But there are also things which I've learned about myself, about other people, and some of them are actually positive, so they help me. I think captivity is still a protracted situation for me in many ways.
You're obviously a philosophical person. Has your view of humanity changed from what it was, let's say, 10 years ago, having gone through what you've gone through?
I wouldn't say my view on humanity changed, but there are things which I would prefer not to witness. I thought to myself, and I knew, I was dealing with refugees, trying to assist refugees for more than 15 years of my life. And there were very different people among them, with very different backgrounds and experiences. And there were, unfortunately, quite a lot of victims of torture. So I'm afraid I knew about torture quite a lot, about what human beings can do to other human beings for the sake of political purposes or power or something else. But one thing is to know or to listen to stories about it, and another thing to witness it and experience it. This is something I would prefer, of course, not to have, but maybe it is important and it makes me more knowledgeable about this area. Otherwise, I've learned a little bit more about how fragile human beings are, but at the same time how strong and resilient they can be, how adaptive they can be, but also how they can be very faithful and truthful when it comes to some fundamental values. And what hasn't changed is that I really understand that we can be degraded by pure physical consistent violence to a very pitiful way of life, but we can also overcome ourselves and become more than we are. We can be better. We can be, speaking religious language, be animals or demons, but we can be angel-like as well. Human beings are capable of doing incredible things to each other, both in bad but also in good ways.
Finally, Maksym, what does it mean for you to receive the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize?
It is an incredible honor. Honestly speaking, I was surprised, also because on this very date, 1 year ago, I was in captivity, but now I am free, while two other nominees, they are in detention at this moment. To me, it is a sign of solidarity with all the journalists who fight for free speech and freedom of expression. To me, it is a sign of solidarity with Ukraine, with Ukrainian people who fight not only for their independence and freedom, but also to values fundamental to all of us, and a sign of solidarity with all those in captivity. It is a great honor, but also I take it as an obligation that I am obliged to continue doing whatever I can to improve the human rights situation and to do my best to help move our society and our humanity towards the state where we can live freely in respect towards each other and without fear.
Well, thank you very much for speaking to the Havel Channel. Good luck to you and good luck to your brave nation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.